I think when I looked at that folder, there was like 15 to 20 different abilities that we tried
With Gekko alone.
before we landed.
You can just send him to. It did really? Why is it not in the game?
It was just it did a lot. At a certain point, like you can send it forward and it would open a door.
But are you guys looking at a rework of Reyna to make it more team-based?
A lot of the things that the players feel, we like feel every night also. So we're definitely investing. We think live game is the bloodline of the, you know.
Hello everyone, this interview with Ryan from Riot Games was recorded in the first week of February 2025. I released it in March because not only I'm slow at editing, but also this was needed to be approved by Riot and we had to cut out some stuff that was too naughty to show publicly. But I hope you guys gonna enjoy and learn a lot from this talk with Ryan. I personally loved it. I know this should have been an interview, but it is a podcast because it turns out I'm not the best at interviewing people, but hopefully it will get better in the future. I plan to do this a lot more often if we get time with Riot game developers. Tell me in the comments if you liked it or not, or who do you would like to see on the screen next. I'm incredibly honored that Ryan here is with us. Ryan is a game developer for Riot who's responsible for many things. Welcome Ryan to the show video. I actually don't know how to even call it, but hello Ryan, how are you doing?
Good. How's it going? I know you and I talk a lot outside of this stuff and we always like share notes and stuff, but yeah, I'm Ryan. I'm one of the game designers on VALORANT, started on the agents team. I was actually the QA, so I was doing like a lot of the testing for each of the agents and then moved into game design, started on, I think it was Yoru first, Kayo, Neon, Gekko, and Tejo. And then after Tejo, moved over to the live balance team. So helping Dan, Tiffy, and some other folks just figure out, like, you know, as we're investing more into the live game, more and more resources towards like making sure we have everything balanced and that we can sustain and stuff like that. I'll be helping with kind of putting a lot of the pieces together for agents and whatever else we might need. Judging
by the way that you worked in Riot in the past, you had been in very responsible positions. Now live balance is also, well, directly responsible for how the players interact with the actual game. So both of those positions that you had incredible impact on the entire game, but also on the community. So what I know is that even when sometimes the developers interact with the community, which doesn't happen always, and by the way, I think Riot is the best at it because I had a context of working with the TFT team before from the alpha stages in Los Angeles, and all of you guys who are developing TFT were so open to talking to the community, and it seems like it's very similar in VALORANT, which is not something that happens in other games. Now, what I would like to ask you, because even though you interact guys with the community members, not many people actually know how a day of a developer in Riot looks like. So my question is, like, what's your typical day of work, the workflow, like how it looks? Do you have like a routine? Was it way different as an agent developer and it's now different as a live balance developer?
Yeah, so it's not too different. I think a lot of the collaboration still happens with designers, and so right now I'm kind of working with like Dan, who's the lead of the live balance team. Working with him, we're just like talking every morning, wake up in the morning, we talk about different balance things or you know, different states of iterations for things we want to change, talk about what the next steps are for it are, and we're kind of just talking, iterating, play testing for most of the day, and then iterating again, coming back, trying it again. So locking down a lot of that stuff. The big difference between that and agents was on agents, you are doing a lot of that stuff and working with your leads and some other designers to kind of like look at these things, but you're also working with different disciplines, like a lot of the art disciplines and production and product. So it's a lot more like there's a lot of stand-ups and different meetings to make sure that we're hitting the notes on the art and the gameplay and everything's kind of playing well together. For live balance, because it's all like there's not, sometimes we have to change some stuff, like, you know, Yoru is a good example. We had to have a full team working on this rework. A bunch of people from VFX to animation, just all over the place, and audio. But there's some changes that are just number changes, so we're able to do that without kind of just like, you know, changing some numbers. So yeah, it's a little different, but it's still kind of the same level of work.
Okay.
I get to talk to the players a little bit more, I think, now. Because I think it's kind of like this fast, like, hey, here's what we're thinking, here's what you're seeing, here's how we want to change it, versus on agents, it's like, I can't. It's a whole year of being in silence, you know.
Yeah.
Working on an agent, so it's kind of cool. I think I like this better for sure.
Yeah, because you also have probably changes being done much more rapidly, right, than with agents that has to go through so many departments. And that's why one of my another questions was, with how many departments we're actually working when designing an agent, like how long it takes, and with how many people you have to collaborate to actually create an agent, because it has to be a very complicated process, right? And on top of that, how many typically agents were in development at the same time?
Yeah, there's a couple pods running in parallel. I think we have a lot of really good designers right now on the team working on the agents. Like we stacked up pretty well to make sure that we can, you know, give agents more time. I think before it was just like a few of us and we were just like jamming so fast, like 2-3 agents at a time. But it was like so back to back. But now we're able to have a little bit more breathing room and let teams really just like work on the right thing for what they want the art to be. So it takes about similar time from beginning from inception to finish, which is a year, but we have up to 4 or 5 agents in parallel at once compared to 2 to 3 before.
So essentially this is like a 2 years of work, right? Because like that's how many agents would you release typically on 2 years? It was planned to be 6 agents per year though at the beginning of Valorant life cycle, right? But that was probably like very early, like a reality check, when it's probably way more complicated to do with a live game, right? But also, no, I'm not sure if you remember the community's reaction to the amount of content that was proposed at first, which was 2 maps per year and 6 agents per year. People were saying, "Oh, that's not enough." Like they were complaining that it's not enough, and then when it slowed down in the initial process, the community was saying, "No, it's too much," even when it was less than the 6 agents per year. What was your reaction to that?
I think, you know, like there's a lot to the game and a lot to get used to. So I'm sure it's like adapting to just kind of like how much content's coming out. I think it's like hard to sustain that for a lot of teams to do 6 agents a year. I think initially we wanted to push for more agents because we wanted to make sure that we had enough of the agents and different varieties to make the game feel pretty fresh. I think now there's so many ways we can kind of affect the game and change the game in ways to make it fresh and make sure that our agents are balanced and weapons, and we're like last year we showed a new weapon, and we're working on different maps, different weapons, like making a weapon, saying, oh, we don't want to do that at all, not testing a weapon for a long time, and we always are experimenting with different things. So I think like we have a lot of different spaces where content can be introduced, and I think on the agent side, I'm not sure like where we stand now with some of the agent stuff. I'm pretty disconnected from it a little bit more, but I know that we want to make sure that like we can sustain and have time to work on even the live stuff, right? Because we kind of share resources in many ways. Yeah. So the people that are best at making the agent stuff will also be helping us make the new art for different changes we might want to make, right? Like the Yoru as an example. So we want to make sure that we're sustaining the team in a way that's healthy and not like, crunching and stuff like that.
Okay. And by the way, you mentioned weapons. My question would be, as a live balance team, do you actually have the responsibilities to balance the weapons as well? Or is it only like agents focused balance?
Right now we look at the whole thing. So we have maps, agents, and we have
interesting.
A few more folks. Yeah, it won't be me or Dan. Like we'll be talking about some of the stuff, but it's still a lot of the team. Like a lot of the team is pretty integrated. We have agent designers, like I was like helping with live balance and just kind of like it's a big team project. The benefit of me being like solely on live balance is that I can make sure that we're kind of pushing things through with Dan, and Dan's not like trying to do all the changes by himself and just kind of dying. It helps to have an additional person. So yeah, between me, him, and then our engineer Chunlock, we were able to really push for like fast iteration on things and get things into more of a soak, as opposed to like, hey, let's test this one time, I think this is good, let's push it, so it gives us a lot of space to do that and make sure that we're making the right changes.
Okay, cool. It's very interesting to hear that you guys have essentially the entire game under your wing. It's like I was thinking like you're working more on the balance side of the agents, which I will have more questions for that in the future. But before we move on, I wanted to ask more like a fun question that maybe some of those things I feel like were shared. Someone was saying that there was like a big wingman in one of those tests like happening in the past, right? And you're the grandpa of Gekko, as you say yourself. So could you maybe tell us some trivia, some like interesting tidbit in agent development? Was there something really funny that happened that of course was a bug or like unintended mechanic that you could share with us? Do you remember anything like that interesting?
We got a lot. There's a lot of stuff that we're recycling. Gekko was a fun one because we were Gekko was a way for us to take old mechanics and try them that haven't worked in the past, or try new mechanics. So we did like, I think when I looked at that folder, there was like 15 to 20 different abilities that we tried
with Gekko alone.
Before we landed. Yeah, before we landed on like what we wanted, and you know it started to get more simple and stuff. So we were able to try a lot of really cool stuff, and then you know directionally a lot of them didn't fit, or we were able to learn a lot of stuff from them. One of them was actually like when you threw Wingman forward, you could send a shield around him. Does that sound familiar?
Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, did it look like a bulb by any chance?
Yeah, so that was one of the ones that you know me and another designer had collaborated on to see like, hey, does this feel cool? It felt like it wasn't doing the right thing for Gekko, so we had moved it to a different agent, which is you know Harbor was able to use it as kind of his like very like protector wavy like identity. So there's a lot of that fun stuff, and then the wingman actually was something we've been wanting to do for a long time. I feel like I might have talked about this already, but it used to be on Killjoy back in the day.
As a turret, like a replacement of the turret.
No, so Killjoy still had a turret.
Okay.
So it was turret, and then the alarm bot you threw forward, and it's the alarm bot now. But if you threw it onto the bomb, it would defuse it.
I see.
Yeah. So the only problem with that is it kind of had like a really weird identity of like, should I use it to hold my flank or should I use it to defuse a bomb? And it didn't feel like it was that sharp. And so we were able to find a home for it on Gekko. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that we did on Gekko was like stuff we've tried in the past, and it ended up being pretty cool shape putting it all together.
It would be such a different game. If Killjoy would have that ability, she would have changed like her entire identity. Probably the turret would have been moved to a viable utility and the bot would have been a signature then, right? Because that would actually solve the problem of like, what do you do with it? You can do both now, right? That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. It's so cool. And you know what I wish though with Wingman? I really wish that he had the ability to bring you guns from the ground, like you can just send them to. It did really? Why is it not in the game?
It was just it did a lot. At a certain point, like you can send it forward and it would open a door, and you sent it forward and it would bring a gun to you, and then it felt like it was kind of a little flat. It lost a little bit of the push, because that put a lot of the pressure on Dizzy to be the only thing that would break angles. So we had to find something that kind of felt like it was helping you take space. But yeah, I think Wingman was because we wanted it to be basically like your little like utility
buddy.
Like,
Yeah,
utility buddy. So go forward, get the gun for me, or go plant the bomb, or do all this stuff. But I mean, maybe in the future we have some more space to be more unique with some of that, and you know, like find ways to do it. I couldn't do it. I in the time I had, I couldn't really find the right abilities on the other two to make it so that the utility bot could stand on its own. But I don't know, like I feel like in the future there's a lot of space to kind of explore more of the utility and things like that, right? Try to evolve the game in a way that still feels tactical.
Yeah. I mean, Gekko feels like could use some help, I would say. Like, it's like a very weird spot. We're gonna get to that, but when it comes to initiators. But thank you for sharing that. That is so cool. Like all of those small tidbits that typically, as a player, as a community member, you don't have access to. You know, it's like it opens up a lot of the questions that people have, because also typically people when they judge like changes of agents or like wait for a rework on an agent, they don't really understand how much work it actually is to do like a rework of Yoru. Could you so not only Yoru but like an agent rework, right? Like looking at Habo and Deadlock being in the pipeline for probably a few months now. and people don't understand that it's art department, sound department, it's live balance, right? Or like the balancing team, and then also the agent, agent team has to all collaborate to make a rework. So, and because people are so anticipating the changes to Harbor and Deadlock, could you tell us how long did it actually take to rework Yoru as context?
Yeah, for Yoru, I think that took us. I think we were working on that for a couple months. I think it was almost a year we had been working on it, because there's a lot of abilities we were trying and tunings. And then when we had finally committed to it, I think it was close to. It was like under a year for sure. I think it was like, I'm pretty sure it was under a year. But we had to have new VFX for the clone, not the footsteps.
Yeah, exactly.
We had to add, we had to test it. Testing itself was probably like 3 months or so, like for us to just make sure the gameplay was correct. The animations on the ultimate, that was painful, and I apologize.
Which animation?
Multiple times. So you know how before you couldn't cast any of your utility while you were masked out?
Yeah.
Only your TP. So now we had to reauthor a lot of those to work with canceling the TP and stuff like that, right?
I see.
So if you're casted and then you want to rip your mask out or put yourself back in, there's a lot of that stuff that is kind of like able to blend, but it wasn't intended to before. So there's a lot of those things that we had to change and update, and so it took a lot of time. But yeah, for like even, you know, if any reworks we do, it's always painful because there's a lot of abilities that change, and we have to make sure that the identity still stays true, but a lot of the art will change. So yeah, it takes a couple months. It takes a while.
Yeah, I hope people will listen to you here and be more understandable, I would say, of how long actually takes to rework an agent who was designed in the first place. And the testing also, I didn't mention that, but you mentioned it. At the end, with all of those changes, don't have to be tested, and then maybe you go back to the drawing board and start essentially from new, right? But by the way,
I think it's.
Sorry.
I was saying, I think it's tough too, because like I know how excited I get like when I was playing Rogue and WoW was just like not good for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like I want something more. And you know, a lot of the games that we play, you know, there's like, it's I agree with you. It's sometimes hard to like put ourselves in the shoes of like developers, but at the same time, I think it all comes from like a lot of the passion to like want to play something that you like. So I'm glad that at least it's like, you know, people are really sticking around and like trusting us that we will be looking at a lot of these things and like, you know, at least addressing them and stuff like you said. So yeah, we always want to make sure that we're talking to the community in many ways. And instead of just doing it because the community wants it, it's like feeding the passion, you know. It's like,
yeah,
like Yoru rework, so many people wanted the Yoru changes, even the Viper stuff. You and I talked about the Viper stuff for like months, you know.
I think I was one of the only people on the planet that actually played Viper before the first changes. Like, I truly think that she was the only unplayable agent at the beginning of Valorant, because she was damaging her own allies with all the DK, and it just made the game just so tough. And there was so many iterations of Viper, right?
Yeah. So there's it's a lot of that stuff, you know. It's like we're always wanting to make sure we're making the right changes, because we wouldn't want people to wait a second time. So some of them just take a little bit longer to make sure we get it right. But
yeah. So talking about agent balance, how much, if you could share, I don't know if you are able to, but how much the impact of the community actually you take into consideration when it comes to making some balance changes to the agents, or is it just like purely more like your own analytics and like decision making?
it's a pretty high factor. I think we factor in a lot of things. Sometimes like the community, sometimes like community sentiment can feed a lot into it, depending on like if something is very frustrating, or you know, like there's just stuff that we might have like missed on.
Is there a thing that you missed on, and you could say what was it?
I think some of the Yoru stuff might be there. Like we probably should have acted on there. I think I'm trying to think of what else there is. I think there's some of the Tejo stuff that we knew that we wanted to fix in the future. But I think a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things around like the Killjoy ult and just like utility being easily killed that like feels like it was a bet that we took, because like, you know, we wanted to make sure we found the right solution before we put one out. So there's a couple of those things that like we definitely want to address. Like Does it have to do as much damage as it does? Like maybe no. You and I talked about like, should it kill Killjoy Ultimate? Like, is there a way that we can solve it so that it doesn't kill Killjoy Ultimate but still flushes you? There's a lot of those things that, like, the sentiment of like how players playing it, we feel that as we play it as well internally. So it more or less like validates. I think it more so validates a lot of the feelings that some of us have, because it feels like internally one or two of us will have that pain point.
Yeah.
But then it like that one person probably matches like thousands, right? Like of people that probably feel the same thing. Like we have Killjoy mains that where it's like Tejo is like owning me.
Yeah.
And I was like, we think that's right, but there's probably something better we can do. And so, it's that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a direct outcome of the change to the utility, right? Like how much utility deals damage to other utility pieces. That was like the patch,
right.
like I don't know, like 6 months ago or something like that, right? So that's like a direct outcome of it, right? But it's funny how Killjoy players always get the let's say the bad end of the short end of the stick, because they had been in the past with the breach, right? With the aftershock, like instantly deleting it. It was funny stuff.
Shot darts, right?
Yeah, all of that. That was pretty rough to play Killjoy at many times. I actually have a question, because my personal, let's say, score of how I judge new agents is pretty on point lately, and it started when I realized I was so wrong about Jet. In the beginning, and it's one of the things that I'd really like to use that as an example. I was saying that Jet just has, at the beginning of the Valorant, right, 5 years ago, I was saying like, Jet is not really a good agent because she's so selfish. Like she doesn't really create, like she doesn't really get value for the team. That was before anyone realized that her job is to create space instead of like anything else, right? People were still using her as a chamber essentially. Right. But then, and I thought I was right, because the developer team added the third smoke and boosted it to 7 seconds long. That was the moment when my like the small switch in my brain went, wait, this agent is broken now. Like this is just incredible. Like she can almost fully defuse the spike with one smoke, and the smokes are like 100 credits each. So my question is, was it the same for you as developers, as the agent team, that Jet was perceived as not really a good agent at the beginning?
No, we thought Jet was broken, or not broken, but like very strong. Like there was I think like with Jet, she breaks a lot of rules, but in a way that like is selfish and very risky in many ways. I thought the third smoke was crazy. Remember the dash broke trips also?
That was insane as well. That was at the same time when she had free smokes as well. It was like, what the hell?
Yeah. So I think it was less about because it's a new game, so we're not sure and like how it's going to release. I was in QA at the time, and I remember when we were talking about this, but when we had made that change, I know it was like, we want to make sure that like the floor or like the entry to mastery isn't too steep to where you just kind of lose it. I think Yoru is a different example though, where like Yoru, the baseline value might not be as good as some of our other agents, but the top end is like, he's pretty strong.
It's funny because in my own compendium of agents that I like break down, like all the responsibilities for the agent and so on, Yoru has like the very high skill floor and in the highest skill ceiling. Like it's such a complex agent to play, right? While Jet, on the other hand, was in the past so simple to play because you just reacted, you dashed, you didn't have to activate. There was no like risk actually management, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the shape though that I thought was really cool that the designers in the past had wanted, and the vision they had was like, we want to make, like, think about smokes now, right? So versus you want them to be able to be placed with precision because you want players to access the strategy. So that's some of the theory on Tejo, right? It's like map targeted mollies, kind of crazy.
That's
but
true.
Being able to access the strategy has a little bit of the nuance, like, like being able to really see what the strategy looks like and reach it and then figure out like what happens around it. I think Jet was a good example where like I think it might have just been like very new, and a lot of players were still kind of slowly picking up how to like play this type of like very action oriented agent that had like the ability to like on a dime make a different decision and affect the way she fights you in combat. very, very exciting, was just a little bit harder to access. So we made a couple changes to make it so that you can access a bit of that floor. And the players, quickly were able to see like, whoa, actually the numbers were probably pretty right. And then we bumped it back down. But I think in the beginning we were less. It felt like we wanted players to kind of pick it up a little bit faster and see what that vision is. It really helped help us understand what kind of shapes of agents and how to build agents in a way that or how we would want to build agents in a way that made it so that it was accessible at a baseline and then just super high mastery, or sometimes maybe we don't want it to be super accessible, but if you spend the time it becomes really good, or the opposite, not a high ceiling, but then pretty approachable to use. I think Gekko was an example of that. Is your stuff kind of gets countered pretty easily by
shooting
players. But at different levels, the baseline of using the abilities is pretty easy, and you get value. So there's a lot of different shapes that we were able to learn about with agents, and some of the changes we had before. You'll see on Viper, we wanted to make it more accessible, and we can tune it down. And we don't ever intend to make it overpowered and then bring back down. We always think we're pretty close. But sometimes we might be a little bit too low or too high on the power.
That brings me to another question, because I think it's a good segue into one of my later questions. When Chamber was released, he was perceived by majority of the community, pro players and coaches as well, because I was speaking with a lot of them, and they were telling me, nah, he's not good. He is not going to be played at pro play. Several VCT coaches from tier 1 teams told me that. I disagreed heavily. I said on my stream many times, day one of Chamber release, I said, he's very good. Although my own perception was a little bit different than what the reality was, because I thought he's just such an incredible agent for team-based mechanics, because he breaks the economy. He is the arms dealer. He's able to get you so many more gun rounds. Getting an operator, back then it was basically 2 operators a half minimum, right? It changed a little bit with the economy changes, the ops, and so on and so on. But in general, my perception was that it was so incredibly valuable. But then I thought about the TP and how fast it allowed rotations, so on. There was an additional layer. But do you think, or is your opinion, what is your opinion? Was it a breaking point in agent design when it comes to that your drawing board is guys, we actually, I think, pushed it a little bit too much, and now we have for the several new agents go a little bit down? Or was it just a coincidence that the next agents after release of Chamber was that the power level was very much on the lower side?
I think with Chamber, it depends on the abilities, right? It's I think mobility and TP are generally pretty strong. I think it helped us understand a little bit better what it meant to have reactive teleport or defensive combat evasiveness and stuff like that, especially with the op, empowering with it. It helped us understand our guns better. So a lot of the stuff that we put into the game, I don't think is a sense of oh yeah, this is going to be super broken, but more so hey, this is what we think is right based on what our current environment is, and then players adapt and play the game a bunch more and learn different types of mastery, and we have to change it, and so okay, actually they found something really cool, let's try playing it this way, let's probably try playing it this style. I think for Chamber it was pretty, I think it was still pretty strong, because we knew that for the same reason you were saying, having an op, being able to just have a really powerful gun as a weapon that could stall a kill potential, it sounds really exciting. It was about finding the right execution for it, and so we were kept tweaking. As far as the agents that came after Chamber, it was Neon Fade Harbor Gekko.
Yeah, so Neon was a little bit on the underpowered side, right? Although her perception was that she's giga broken. That's funny, because my perception was not good enough, right? But the community was outraged by the possibility of someone sliding in, right? And that was the release. So that was the next thing. And then we had Fade, who was a little bit too good, I would think. But Harbor is definitely one of those agents that had to be buffed immediately. If I remember correctly, he was the only agent in the entire game that got a buff 2 weeks after release, because he got the second cascade, and there were several number changes on the duration of the smokes as well, if I remember right.
Of the wall.
Yeah, and then we had Gekko Deadlock.
2 patches after, yeah. I think we waited a patch and maybe it was the next patch after. I don't remember. Maybe it was pretty quick. But yeah, so speaking on kind of like the power levels, Neon. I mean, I worked on Neon, and I was pretty sure that like just like Yoru, we had to be very careful how we pushed it. We wanted to be as balanced as possible, because if it was too strong, then it's you know, it can lead to a lot of frustrating gameplay, especially with like the amount of speed, the timing she can break, and the like slide combat readiness and stuff. Like we even increased some of that because I think now players are getting pretty good at, you know, it's a new mechanic. Sliding, I think sliding and dying to it is going to be pretty frustrating, but once you get the flick and the muscle memory of killing the Neon,
satisfaction is pretty high.
Good.
Yeah.
So you know, we were able to give her a little bit more power in some of those things, and so for Neon, you know, that was we wanted to make sure that wasn't like too strong, and then we wanted to, if we went weaker, then we can slowly push. For Fade, we wanted it to, I think Fade was like a tough one because it had to compete with Sova as like
when he was actually incredibly good, right?
So the power levels were going to be pretty equal, and you know, Sova was pretty good. I think for Harbor, yeah, a lot of the stuff that we were doing on Chamber, I think like none of that probably fed into like why the power was low. It's just more so the shape of the agents. Like Harbor wanted to be a lot more like focused on ease of use of the smokes and not having a dome smoke, being able to like put a lot, like most of the stuff is smokes right on the kit. So there's a lot of that stuff in Harbor where it's like maybe that's causing a lot of the friction. You can't see the baseline value as much, and it's creating a lot of noise there. So that's some of the stuff we're looking at, you know, on Harbor is working on finding ways to like increase the baseline value and make it a little bit more interesting in how you want to play the round out instead of just smoking. So yeah, that was kind of a long-winded answer to say I don't think it changed. I don't think we like I think we were more cognizant that we didn't want like something that stayed in the game for a long time like Chamber did, because it took us a long time to make some of the changes on Chamber. We wanted to make sure we were doing the right changes on Chamber because it was a tough one. Like him being too weak would basically kill him because it's all guns. Like, you know?
True.
His TP was a lot of his power, so we wanted to make sure we got the changes right on Chamber. And then the rest of them kind of like, you know, allowed us to have better tooling for sure to understand how strong or how weak different parts of a kit can be and how we can react to some of those changes. So it gave us some learnings, but I think it wasn't in the sense of like, should we launch characters weak or should we launch them strong?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense with the previous answer that you made when saying that agents take like, you know, year to develop. Essentially, when you were releasing Chamber, you already had the other agents basically almost done, right? That were next to be released. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We saw humongous changes to the way you can play Neon. I'm not even talking about the double slide or the accuracy. I'm talking about the way that she was sprinting. Back in the day, you were only able to sprint by pressing W. Now, it got essentially changed to like more like omni movement kind of thing, right?
The community sees this agent as like a very skillful, expressive movement duelist. Can we empower some of that is kind of like what I would deduce is where we got to for a lot of the Neon stuff, like being able to really like make that feel expressive for players. So there was a lot of that like, you know, there's some stuff that we were scared of that we had put like guardrails on, but as we saw it on live, it wasn't as big of a deal.
Like for example,
there's still a lot to do on Neon, but like just jiggle strafing. I think jiggle strafing actually wasn't as it's a lot more punishable than we've like on live than it was internally. I think internally, like the way we were doing it was just like it was giga broken. But then when you have players that are able to just like really practice playing against it and just punish it and get the muscle memory faster than we were internally, it's easier to be like, oh, okay, I guess, you know, it doesn't need some of those guardrails. I think like there's a lot of the backward slide stuff that we wanted to support now with like, you know, we added like the animation for it because, you know, players really were able to just do a lot of this like really tricky movement that like they were engaging with. So we wanted to make sure we supported it. So there's a lot of that stuff. I remember when backslide was happening, I was like, is this good or bad? And I was like, players are like finding ways to be tricky with it.
You mean like in the first iteration of Neon, because backsliding was exactly, jumping and then pressing it correctly with the timing when you hit the ground, right? So I mean, from my perspective, was that the old Neon movement was very rewarding for players who put the time in and were able to do something that no one else was able to do unless you put 100 hours of practice into Neon movement, right? But then at the same time, that's like gatekeeping players from actually an agent, right? Because you opening up the movement type of things for Neon essentially made her accessible for all the people that didn't put those hours. So you think that would be more valuable, like having to like open the agent to more people in the first place?
I think it depends on the agent. I think like Yoru, we specifically are not making it as accessible for now, at least, right? It's like I think if we make Yoru accessible and he still has the high mastery, it's probably a miss.
Please don't buff him anymore. I think I have 2.5k hours with Yoru. If he gets buffed, I thought that the previous buff of the Flash was already unnecessary. I was like, no, he's gonna get nerfed the moment. And I feel like he's in the perfect spot. Like he is slightly overpowered, but he requires so much mastery that is not yet seen. And I think like in VCT we don't see still the level of Yoru that should be playable as a tier 1 player essentially. So there's still a lot of room to grow.
So I think that's exciting. I think for Neon, there's some of the movement that we want to be part of the baseline in many ways. Not the crazy movement, just the baseline. Like I slide and I have friction now. I can't slide now because I accidentally tapped left.
You got hit.
Like I tapped it, or you got hit, and now I can't slide. Like why is that the case? So we removed some of the restrictions on how fast we lowered the restriction of how fast you should be running when you can slide and stuff like that. There's small pieces like that are less about like affecting the mastery, but instead allowing players to kind of get a taste of what the agent wants to be doing. For Neon, I think that's more important. For Yoru, like I think we shouldn't be touching accessibility for Yoru. I think Yoru is just like the agent where you engage, you spend the time, you get there, and then you get the aha moment. That's at least what the players have been saying they really enjoy about Yoru. So we want to make sure we're supporting that.
So what's your favorite agent in the game, and why is it Yoru?
Actually, it's so funny. It's Harbor is one of my favorite agents.
No way, really? You have to explain yourself now.
I think the creativity and seeing different harbors and how they cast their wall. I think there's just way too much friction. Funny enough, I get to work on the harbor changes, so I'm doing the harbor changes.
Oh,
with Dan.
Can you tell us anything? No, I thought so.
But there's a lot of creativity in Harbor, and there's a lot of the really cool like initiator moments, because I do think there's something about Harbor where we could really make it so that the initiator plays a little bit heavier. And if you think of like the wall smokers, and Viper is just like, I'm gonna hold the space down. He has a lot of tools that are like, I'm gonna push forward with my wall.
Yeah, but there's not enough pressure with it. Right, there's no power level behind that kit. So I know you cannot really tell us what you guys are working on the rework. So I'll just say my opinion. Okay, I think the problem with Harbor that he's so hard to use is because his kit is so one-dimensional. Right, his entire kit is essentially smokes, and also his most important smoke is counterable by just shooting it. Right, I feel like if the Cove would stay up as a smoke when the shield is destroyed, that would fix a lot of issue with the agent in the first place. You know, it's like one of the things that I feel like it's frustrating when you play with Harbor, because I use the smoke to plant the spike, it gets shot down, and now the plant is completely exposed, right? Because there's no smoke, right, for example. But I think his ult is actually pretty fucking amazing, you know? Like it's such a good pressure and information tool, heavily underrated, I would say. But the problem is the rest part of the kit.
Yeah, so that's the feeling. I think like as we've been doing the Deadlock stuff and the Harbor stuff, there's always that like feeling that players want out of the character, and we want to push it. So like you saw my tweet. I think we want to push the way people are playing Deadlock. Same for Harbor. I think the ult is a great moment. It's a really good like, hey, this is the Harbor moment.
Yep.
Is there ways we can distill that into the base kit? Because right now it's not, right? It's like smoke, and then go forward. Is there anything we can do with the kit to make it feel more go forward and stuff like that, but doesn't go too hard into like, I'm an initiator? So that's the tricky balance, and I don't think we've landed on anything that we're like 100% on. We're getting pretty close, but if we were more solid, I'd talk a little bit more about it. It's just we don't know what we're confident in yet to lock, so stay tuned.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only controller that doesn't have like a tool for the initiation, as you mentioned, like the paranoia, the steam beacon, the mollies, right? All of that is such a crucial part of the kit for the controllers, right?
I think Yoru's probably my second favorite after, for sure.
Okay.
I'm a blue player in Magic, so there's a lot of like annoying blue stuff that he does.
Definitely think that. It's funny because I use a lot of nomenclature from card games because I'm a card player myself, ex-professional as well. So, for example, I use a lot of counter spells in my in the way I describe the game, because when my viewers ask me like what else is like one of the main things that you should learn when you're playing Valorant, I say you should learn to counterspell, which is essentially someone flashes you flash them back, even if you don't see anything. Just the act of flashing back is the way to counterspell your opponent's spell, right? There's a lot of parallels between card games and Valorant, actually, when I think about it.
When I first joined, I remember I was like, I want to be like, I was aspirational. I was like, I want to be the agent designer that makes blue characters, right? And then the ironic part is all the characters that I like helped with and designed, we ended up making the color blue.
I thought you were gonna say it's just like a choice, an actual choice because you wanted to. I was like, you say it was an accident.
No, yeah. So Kayo's like, I'm looking right now. Kayo, Yoru, Neon, they're all the color blue.
Yeah. And Gekko is like greenish, so that's very close to blue, you know?
Yeah. So like Yoru is very like, I'm mind gamey. Kayo is like the counter spell for me. Like I'm thinking of it as he's the counter spell agent,
yes,
right? Like, you can't do the thing you want to do, and then I do my moves like almost like blue red, and then Yoru's kind of like, I guess also blue red.
yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
I think of Neon as like blue flyers, like really annoying, like
evasion and so on.
Flyers early and just like pinging you, and you're like, oh my god, I can't deal with this yet. And
this is breaking the game.
So
okay.
It was a fun way to think about it, for sure. Like I always like using like colors to think about like some of the agents also. But it's just like, everyone has their own way of thinking of it. For me, I played so much Magic that I was like, it's the way that I thought about it.
Off-topic question: did you try any other card games lately?
I've been getting back into LOR recently. A lot of people were like, Project K is really fun. I didn't have a chance to play it yet.
Yeah, me same.
But I
would
see
love to.
Aether Drift is coming out.
Okay.
Yeah, Aether Drift. I'm excited to play that set for sure.
Yeah, you should try out those Star Wars Unlimited. I think it's mechanically wise, I think it's the most interesting card game I have ever tried in my life, because it's essentially Magic and Hearthstone, but with action economy. So it's like my action, your action, your action, my action, and you pass and so on. So it's like chess, but with card games. It changes the entire game. Like, very off topic, but a high recommendation from me. Even if you're not a Star Wars fan.
It's cool. Yeah, check it out. That's awesome.
So next question is gonna be a little bit harder. So maybe you will not answer. We'll see. Since you're now on Life Balance team, and you also have the context of the agent developing system, we are currently in a space where players are in ranked very disconnected from the experience that you see on the pro level, right? And I feel like in other games from Riot, I felt like the balancing was always done to connect those two audiences together, right? But like in League of Legends, the meta game of the pro level was affecting directly the players in ranked. Now, it feels like at the beginning of Valorant, that was the case with the agent changes as well. But now there's a little bit, from my perspective, of course, and that's my opinion, a little bit of dissonance. When you go to websites that check the pick rates of agents, and I don't know if they're correct, I hope they are correct, because I have no idea, right? But like Meta SOC shows you pick rates. When you go to the pick rates of agents, turns out that Jet is being picked on 1.5 Jet on average every lobby. If you're in Korea, by the way, every lobby has 2 Jets on average.
That's crazy.
Like 19.
On the same team?
I mean, that would be crazy. But it's like 19.5% pick rate. So essentially, it's almost 2 Jets every single game. But the top 3 are Jet with like around 15%, and then we have Clove with like 12, and Reyna with like 10. Now, when you compare that to pro level, Clove and Reyna are nowhere to be seen. And a lot of the changes that we have seen in the past were being affecting, like Viper changes. She was 90% pick rate on almost every single map, so she got nerfed to, well, let's say to the ground. Like I, as a Viper main, had to change because I didn't enjoy her at all because of the changes. And now it seems like agents like Reyna got a buff just because of the pro rate that she was at, which is basically 0, right? After some time, because the first 6 months, I don't know why the pro teams were playing Reyna, but I digress. And she is, because of that, dominating ranked. Now, how do you feel about balancing those two worlds together? And what is your philosophy now when it comes to tackling this, I would say, issue?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think it's, we want to always make sure that the game is accessible, but I think there's going to be some stuff that it will be harder for players to access at like that level of coordination in pro. So some agents we think will just inherently be better
for sure
when like Kayo. Kayo's a good example.
Yeah.
Like worst, I think it's the worst win rate we have right now.
Yes, it is definitely worse. Yes, low pick rate, low win rate. It's so hard to utilize him, but when you utilize him well, he's suddenly game winning in ranked.
So good. Yeah. So there's a lot of those things where we want to find systems and agents that like help introduce players to like really push for a coordinated play. But I think we're starting to see that like the level of coordinated play is just spiking. Like, like players are getting super good at the top level of like coordinating things like KO flashes, knives, and they're able to like use the short duration. Cause like a lot of the buffs right now, like 2-second buff might be too short, might be too long. I think 1.5 seconds for like, let's say you have like a concuss that's 2 seconds on Harbor.
Yep.
That in solo queue might not be something that you can capitalize on in most, like in most games. But then at the pro level, if you pair it with different pieces of utility, that 2 seconds is a long time being concussed, right? So there's a lot of the shapes of agents. This is the tricky part, is like trying to find shapes that make it so that like it's, it's still able to be used, and there's like you're getting to that baseline value of or even just the fantasy and the what we want the agent to be doing for ranked and for Valorant. That's just going to be a lot harder. Like Reyna, I think, is one where like I think Reyna is just countered by like good play. Like she's so dependent on kills and getting kills that like it happens more, like more consistently in pro play. Like they're more set up to be able to get the kills more consistently. And in ranked, like just having like even in 5 stacks, it's like you have to have so much like level of coordination to be able to just like high low every angle that like you think Reyna's going, having that game sense and stuff. So I think we're going to be trying our best to like make sure that that we're looking at like both and making it so that it feels like pretty equal to see, because I think for me, if I see something in pro play, I want to be able to also access that. I think as long as we're making it so that it's accessible and that you can see how to improve to get towards what that high level or that like high level play is, even in like Premiere and stuff, I think we're okay with that. We want to make sure that players are getting that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough balance. I think it's like something that we're going to continue to do, and that's why we're putting a lot of resources in there, is like making sure that like a lot of, there's some agents that are just going to be really good in ranked, I think, because they have a lot of agency. They don't need their team to do certain things, and they have like just a lot of like abilities that make like reduce risk. Like Jet's a good example. Yep. Because like I can just walk up a bunch of angles and like possibly get a kill. Like it's still high risk, but I'm so slippery. And like when I'm playing like in or not me, but like when you're playing in pro play, and that that gets punished more. There are a lot more ops, a lot more like accuracy to punish the like risky play. So I think in rank you can just be a lot more risky. That we're gonna have agents that kind of support that, or like might be able to play into that better. And so I don't think we'll ever get it perfect to where like the pros, like you'll be able to play what the pros play and have that level. I think the game might be too accessible at that point. I think we always want it so that I think it's the game's gonna be at its best when like there's something that you want to reach, and when you finally get there, you just like keep going. Like people that play Yoru is another example, right? or even just like people that have like fade lineups, or just like consistency with fade and stuff like that. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I'm not sure if we'll like ever be able to be perfect on what we're doing, but
I don't think that's possible in any game.
Like live balance, I think we're just going to be constantly swinging, and that's why we want to support the team and being able to like make the changes we want. Is like it's always going to be going back and forth, and there's always going to be pro play and ranked play that we have to balance between two. So there's going to be a lot of changes that we see that we'll try to kind of meet somewhere, but it's never going to be like perfectly like there, I think, or what people want.
Yeah, because like the community's perception, mine as well, is that currently there's like a heavy favoritism towards the duelist characters, essentially. Like all of them are getting buffs constantly, while other agents, other classes are getting nerfs, like initiator, controllers. All of those agents are essentially, when you think about it, Fade nerfed, Sova nerfed, Viper nerfed, Omen nerfed, Brimstone, well, actually buffed. So that's some exceptions here, right? But all of those agents seem to be nerfed because of the heavy coordinated aspect of play from the pro level, right? But that doesn't translate almost at all to ranked, right? So because of that, it skews the pick rate as well. So my question towards that would be, do you guys have like a perception of a level when it would be unacceptable that the agents picked so often? In ranked, not in pro play. In ranked.
I'd have to see the team. I'm not sure if we have. I mean, we always have like we always have like the pick rates, and we're looking at pick rates, looking at win rates. We want to make sure they're not dominating, and like you know, like back in the day, Sage was like a super high pick rate, like in basically every game and stuff like that. Like we want to make sure there's variety. I think we want to see how it plays out. I think agents like Clove will likely be. You know, they're always going to be kind of higher in solo queue. You have like a lot less risk in dying and not being able to smoke for your team and stuff, right? So there's going to be agents that feel like they're going to be kind of a little bit higher in some of this in ranked. I'm not sure if there's an exact number that we look at, but we're always just kind of like looking at the numbers pretty often and seeing like, hey, is this causing like a lack of diversity where we just don't see anything but this agent, and like how does it play in other ranks and stuff? So yeah, so there's not like I don't think there's like a strict number.
Okay.
Just stuff that we're kind of. It's all in the context of like what their environments looks like, and then to kind of like note the like how we look at nerfing and buffing. I think in relation to duelists and initiators, duelists tend to have utility that like are selfish, and their footprints of them tend to be more selfish and less like flashes or site-wide utility, and so that stuff just feels like they die anyways, and so you don't really see a lot of like if you see like 4 Reyna eyes or something, right? It's like you'll see a Reyna eye, and versus like if you saw like every 20 seconds a breach conk or like like the breach E or multiple like 3 flashes on breach back in the day, like
that
seeing
crazy.
that much seeing that much utility that affects that much footprint makes us really concerned sometimes of like the amount of utility used that can create a chaotic game state. I think for duelists it doesn't create too much of a chaotic game state, and it feels like it's more tamed, except like Raze, like imagine if she had like 4 satchels, like then that's probably too much. I think as long as they're just still down to like the duelist being like this risky thing that they still have to do.
Oh, imagine if they dealt 75 damage. That was crazy.
That was crazy.
The only time I got Radiant was when I was playing Raze. I got like last day of episode 1, I went on a 12 solo queue games win streak, and I got the Radiant won 9 times with Raze. That was when the satchels dealt 75 damage. I was just throwing them and just killing people behind the sage wall, essentially. It was crazy stuff.
That was the first design change I made to live.
Really?
It was the Raze satchels and then the Sage heal. I was the one that killed Sage.
I mean, I think she's more. That's actually another question, but I think you already answered it to some degree, because she feels like a ranked agent more than professional play agent. But my question was like, are you guys okay with like creating strictly like ranked agents and some agents that are only like tailored for pro play. But I feel like you kind of answered that you guys are okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we really care about is like not making one for one or the other.
So it's like extremes are not welcomed.
Yeah, it's not that it's not welcome, but I'm not sure if that would be like a healthy shape, is like, hey, we want to make an agent that is only for pros, or we want to make an agent that's only for ranked. I think they sometimes shift into that bucket, but it's not like an intentional like, oh yeah, this is going to be like our ranked duelist only, right? So we wanted to still be able to be feasible in pro at some point, but sometimes some of the mechanics like Reyna has to be shootable, and like you have to get a kill to use your things like that. Like it makes it more risky to be in pro, so then pros don't play it. So then we try to find ways to balance it. But yeah, we definitely don't intend to say like, oh, this is going to be our ranked sentinel and this is going to be our pro sentinel, because it feels like it makes it. We want the game to be basically like not the same, but like it feels like you're playing the same game that the pros are playing. It's just I'm not at the skill level yet. Like for me, I'm like, I want to play Astra. I am not good at Astra. I don't have the coordination or comms or to play Astra, but I really wish I could.
It's tough to play Astra because if you want to use Astra, you essentially cannot shoot in the game at the same time, right? And if you want to use any utility, you have to put yourself twice in that position, first to put it and then to activate it, right? So it's like you're exposed so much. Like I don't envy people like Boaster who just get killed so many times when they pop util. It's brutal.
No, he's so good though. He's a good Astra.
Yeah, that's for sure. The thing that you mentioned is very interesting for me. Like you mentioned you don't want the extreme of like one agent being perceived as just like the one end of the spectrum, ranked and pro. For me, that's currently Reyna. Like I really appreciated the first buff. Actually, people called it a nerf when the orbs were limited from 4 to 2. People were screaming that's a nerf. For me, that was a buff, not because of the change of the amount of orbs, but the way that the assist system worked for her. Because it showed me it showed that the developers understand what was the problem of Reyna in the first place, that she was so focused on the solo kills that her efficiency was basically as a lurker to make sure that she gets the kill, right? And the shift was to make her more team-based player, because now she gets to get the orb when she gets an assist. Now, unfortunately, in ranked, that doesn't matter much now because people don't really care about that anyway. And she becomes like such a strong pick in ranked at any level, Radiant, Immortal, whatever, doesn't matter. She's so heavily often picked. My question would be, and I'm okay if you don't answer that, but are you guys looking at a rework of Reyna to make her more team-based?
Not at the moment. I think our focus is definitely like what we promised is like looking at Deadlock and Harbor. We're looking at, now that we have like some of the bandwidth, we're definitely looking at like where we can impact, in the future, what we can work on. There's like a lot more that we can work on with more people on the team working on this stuff. So Reyna's one of the ones where like I think it's always like a question mark of like, are there any changes we can do to kind of like, change that shift? Do we want to change that shift? Is it just is it kind of like a ranked agent that like some pros want to use as like they have like their mastery of Reyna or things and plans they have? We see some teams were choosing it. I think in VCT, I think there's
essentially Paper X,
like 0%, right?
Yeah. Essentially there's one Paper X pick and then no one else. But at the beginning of the game, when Icebox was released, to my absolute nightmare, when I was casting EMEA, I think like Reyna was 50% or even more pick rate at Icebox, and I was like, why not Killjoy instead? And by the way, that was before Fnatic was picking Killjoy like instead of Reyna. So yeah, funny stories.
I think it'd be cool if we can find a solution that kind of made her more accessible. I think the dream, like right now, we're seeing a lot of agent diversity in VCT. It's like really cool to see. Like a lot, even like different regions are choosing different agents and having their strategies. So like, imagine when we get to like an international competition. Now it's like, how are these all going to clash together? That's going to be super cool. So rationally, if we can look at VLR and it's not like 0% across the board for pick rate on all the agents, that'd be kind of cool. Like that's the dream that we have as the design team. Not sure if we'll get there. I'm not sure if we'll find the right changes, but I think over time we might, you know. Yeah, I think there's like different shapes too of characters, like, or different player styles. Because I feel like your player style is like, you know, being able to understand the meta and choose the right agent for that moment and be kind of like a pretty strong fill. I think that's what I've noticed. At least you like to find like a lot of those like able to fill or the powerful agents and really push for it.
I love min-maxing.
Only, yeah, like you're a card game player, right? You know,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of players that like just want to play one or two agents. They only want to play sentinels, and so it's a lot about like taking all the different motivations across the audience and like all the players that like how do you want to play the game, and finding ways to support the ways we want to support players. And there's some stuff that we don't want to support, like, you know, like
Yep.
there's you know, like if this isn't the case, but like if we didn't want to support some type of movement or something, or like the way Jet was able to just have the dash on a dime, you know, we thought there was a lot of like gameplay that was unhealthy, and so we made the choice to like change it, right? There's stuff like that will affect, but we always put into consideration the different types of players and their motivations. Like your Cypher mains, you know, you always got to think about the Cypher mains. It's like there's a lot of stuff we want to do with Cypher. I think like it's really strong for sure. Like, we hear the players, a lot of players are we share the sentiment, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of the creativity that Cypher players are able to do. How do we make changes that still support the way they want to play, but also make the game a little bit healthier? Finding those things can be tough, but
I think you're actually doing a very good job at this, because so many agents released have like a counterplay to agents like Cypher, Killjoy, Vice as well, because now with the inclusion of Tejo, he has it's such a hard word to pronounce for many people, right? Yeah. Like on the broadcast,
Gekko,
you can hear like how people are struggling with like pronouncing Tejo. But my sentiment was that essentially there's so much damage utility now in the game that wasn't present in the past, that essentially agents like Cypher, like Killjoy are becoming worse over time, as also players learn that they should be using the shock darts to aim at the traps, not to do damage the players instead, right? So there's a different objective, micro objective that they have to do. And on top of that, I would like to actually congratulate you guys as a developers, because Tejo seems to be picked both in ranked and in pro play, which is kind of nice as an initiator. If I'm not mistaken, at Immortal Plus right now, he has like 6% pick rate, which for an initiator is absurd, I would say, in ranked. Like only Sova is reaching similar levels. And in pro play, he's being like, he is underpicked, in my opinion. He should be picked on every map because he's so powerful. It's actually incredible, right? But at the same time, do you guys think it was a good move to introduce such a powerful agent in such a short period of time before new season starts? Like there was a lot of outrage from the VCT players, right? It was the community was like probably excited about it, but the pro players were a little bit less. Do you think it was a good move?
For me personally, I thought it introduced a lot of agent diversity. I think like it's really pushing and testing kind of like the how pro players will adapt to like using Tejo or like playing against them. I feel like it might have been pretty quick, but I feel like it kind of has been panning out pretty well. I don't think I've ever played pro, so I'm not sure if I can sympathize to like, you know, the level of pain they might have felt. So it feels like they're adapting and really they're able to like create new strategy that to me is exciting. But that just might be like my very designer hat, like oh, it's so cool, I see the number, like I see you guys playing it. So I don't think I feel like it might be something that was really painful, but I can't really like feel like how painful that might have been. I think for most agents we do wait a little bit to kind of put them in there, but it was we didn't expect Tejo to be so you know, like meta defining and
really you didn't
pushing. For me, I personally thought that like it was going to be a niche character that was like, you know, more if you want to play and find the right way to play him, it'll be hard to slot him in, but you'll be able to like, you know, find the ways to balance it. But I think what we're seeing now is like there's a lot of those windows and those nuances are like in pro play, you're able to like make so much happen in the small windows. Yeah. Like I think what we got to was like the duration of the things in the world is so small that like, you know, even though they're covering a pretty good amount of space, there's still so many angles that like a flash might be better. So in like ranked play, flashes might just be better. So dart might be better. you cover more angles and you don't have to make the guess and stuff like that. It's easier to play with. But I think like the reliability and the short windows, players are just adapting so fast to being able to take those 2-3 seconds and just make something happen out of it. I think I underestimated a little bit of like how well players would adapt to it. So I think for me, I kind of perceived them as coming in on paper strong, lethal damage, but like overall being pretty weak. That's kind of what my guess was, but I think I was definitely pleasantly surprised to see like the 30% pick rate in Americas, and players really just going gung-ho on trying Tejo out.
Yeah, I made a call on day 1 of Tejo, or day 2, that the team that will win Bangkok is gonna be the team that masters Tejo the most, or like the biggest efficiency. Because from my perspective, it's a little bit different than yours. Like why I thought he's, I would say, overpowered, is his flexibility. Right, because he can do so many different things. He can actually do everything: zone, kill, destroy utility, get info, and also because of this quick equip time on the stun. After the stun, he is able to fight him for himself. Right. Yeah. So it's like there's so much things that you can not only give to your team but also give to yourself, which is so formidable. And because of that, I feel like he's underrepresented even with current pick rate at VCT, and I'm gonna give the team's benefit of the doubt that there was just not enough time to prepare. But also I feel like another thing that was, I'm not sure if that's just a coincidence or a decision that was made at Riot that introduced him at the moment when 2 of his best maps are out of the map pool, because he is absolutely busted on Ascent and Sunset. Not sure if you like tested it out a lot, but he's incredible on those 2 maps because of the shorter spaces and how Breach can actually utilize it with him on those 2 maps. Did you have a chance to like Q and him on those 2 maps?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of maps that we wanted to keep in. I think like Sunset and Ascent he was pretty strong on. I think we chose some pretty good maps for him. But there was a lot of like, there was a lot of other factors outside of Tejo that like, as to why we chose like the map pool. I wasn't, like the maps team and our product team helped kind of identify what those are with saying like, oh, Tejo's coming out. So it's a factor, but not like the main factor of why we choose the map pool. So we definitely don't want it to feel like, yeah, the map pool, every single map he's good at will be there, like we want to add a little bit of variety, I'm sure. So they used Tejo as a factor, but not necessarily the driver for like why the maps are in, I think.
I see. A little bit tie-in question, because in the past the map design of, I know this is definitely not your responsibility, but it's connected a little bit to the question. So the first maps from Valorant were definitely designed in a different manner than the later stages of Valorant, like Freeze, Icebox were more open. We see this like Abyss, all of that pattern is changing a little bit. But I wanted to ask, how big of an impact was map design when it comes to agent design? Is it like a chicken and an egg situation where map design is a result of agent design, or agent design was a result of map design? Because when you compare it to CS, where you don't have the space creation agents, right? You don't have the jet dash, you don't have the Yoru TP, you don't have the satchels. All of that is not replicable. You can't really replicate the experience from CS. The maps are different. So yeah, was it essentially, which one is more, let's say, motivating? Like not motivating, but which is the factor?
Influential.
The influential factor for it.
I guess it's like a push and pull. I definitely feel bad whenever I put stuff in for like maps. Like I think we can design stuff and test them on the maps that we have, and we're pushing out like even new agents we test on new maps. So there's like a lot of stuff that we want to make sure are good on a lot of these maps, which means like we put pressure on the maps team because we're making some of these abilities, and they're adjusting a lot of this stuff to make sure that it fits with the abilities, and we're just kind of like playing this like push and pull to help support each other.
Yep.
I'm not sure if one or the other is more influential, but I know like we push a lot more agents than maps at the moment, so it feels like we're probably molding a lot of the things that we do to fit on some of the maps. And like, you know, if there's a specifically good map, we want it to be feasible there, and like, you know, not just good on one map or two maps. You know, it should be pretty flexible. There's some agents that we think like are probably just fine to be on just one or two maps, but we don't like, you know, intend to ship them, like just like make this is the Icebox agent, because then it, you know, if the team wants to make changes to Icebox, they're not as pressured to like have to abide to a lot of the things that like that agent wants to do and stuff. So yeah, I'm not in the map scene, but I just, that's what it feels like as we talk about a lot of these things. There's a lot of pressure on both sides, and so it's not that one thing is influencing the other, but you know, there is going to be a little bit of influence there in wanting to make sure that like the maps support the ways the abilities work in some of the input paradigms, in the same way as like we're doing the same thing on the other side, is like making sure the abilities are like respecting a lot of the map geo and as much as we can, and finding ways to like improve the abilities that feel like they're creating too much pressure. That's one of the things that I've been really excited to do, is like work with maps to kind of identify which of these abilities. I think Tejo is probably one of the first abilities that's like, oh my god, that's putting so much pressure on the maps team. You know, because like it's map targeted, and same as smokes, but it's actually
it's pathing as well. So it's like there's so much stuff going on there. Okay.
So that was the one that I think was the most painful to kind of work through, and just kind of identify what's a healthy way of making this feel right for the maps we have without like really overwhelming it. Because I know we always talk about this, but I always call like our maps are like this map puzzle. We have this map puzzle that you have to solve as players, and it's like a chessboard. There's two of you on both sides, and you're kind of moving the way you move. We want to make sure that abilities don't just like cheat it too much. You know, I want to, like, you know, just like, oh yeah, if it blanketed the whole site, everything blankets the whole site, like, is that healthy? Does it make it so that it's not interesting and stuff like that? So there's always there's a lot of discussion like constantly about how we can improve some of the abilities. Even I think those are the conversations I'm in, is like, how do we improve abilities to make sure that we're, you know, being more respectful of the map puzzles, and we're not creating too much pressure for map designers in the future.
So tied to that question, it's, I don't know if you were able to answer this. Are you guys looking into Viper because of it? Because one of the critiques towards Viper gameplay and map design was that she was perceived as a must-have on Breeze and Icebox, right? And one of the reasons why she's so heavily nerfed was existence of those two maps. And now with having all the experience of like auto controls being introduced into the game and gameplays being evolved, I hope that more teams would look actually at double controllers for maps like Icebox and Breeze in the future. Do you feel like there's place for Viper to regain some of her flexibility, at least not even power, but like the flexibility that she's lacking now because of the lack of the orb reposition and so on?
Probably. It depends on where we land with Harbor. You know, like, I think we want to make sure there's a world for both of them as a wall smoker to exist. We're talking about Vibe. We're talking about every agent. Like, to be very honest, every agent. Like,
yeah, for sure. I mean,
like a whole year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just recently started talking about like every single agent, and we're just slowly kind of looking at like, hey, where are these agents at? What can we do to, like, you know, like, or like, what's the amount of work ahead of us to like make sure we're kind of like
so
keeping
the timeline is
fresh.
cool.
How do we get these changes, and then how do we make changes in the future? Because we're kind of learning and adapting as a team, especially because we're growing now as like a live balance team. We're just trying to really perfect the way we work and like take in the different factors like community sentiment, data, and all this stuff, and like prioritize things. Dan's doing a great job of like, hey, I think this is like what we're hearing. Here's what data. This is like really powerful. Tejo is like really powerful. There's sentiment against it. There's some ways we can make it healthy. Can we make changes to Tejo? Like, that's, you know, that's the type of conversations Dan's having, and helping us like really understand like where those priorities lay. Right now, I think I'm just Harbor.
Okay. I personally hope that you guys don't nerf Tejo too much, because he will disappear from ranked, but will probably will still be played at pro level, you know. And it's like, I think it's fine for now to have that fresh breath, or like, you know, fresh air in the meta game. Now, another very specific question. So I'm not prepared to get like any answer out of this, but one of the frustrating experiences in Valorant is where you stun someone and he gets the perfect one tap because of the accuracy change, because of the stun. Is that something you guys were thinking, looking at, or like thinking about how to change, or is it something that you could share?
I think concuss is one that we've always didn't. I think we haven't really had the time with all the stuff we're working on to like really put effort into just like thinking about very deeply and in an effort to make a change. We're definitely talking about concuss. We're talking about all like all the different buffs that we have, and so that's part of like a conversation we're having. Like, again, like with me jumping on and then us picking up more people to work on the live balance team, we're able to talk about like the whole game more. So a lot of these conversations are just like, hey, what do we work on? Concuss is one of them for sure. Yeah, concuss is one. Like our flashes, like how should our flashes be? Like, should they be standard across all the agents? And then how should concuss play? Like, what's the important parts of concuss? Is it like the sway? Is it the movement? Like, we're not really, we're still talking about it as a team and aligning. But concuss is definitely one of them. Yeah, it's hard because I'm like we're talking about everything right now. Like literally everything.
I definitely understand that. Can I pitch you something about the stun? Because if it's okay, my personal frustration with the stun comes from the fact that it's tied to so many utility pieces at the same time.
Yeah.
So balancing that is essentially nerfing or buffing at the same time many different agents, right? Yeah. So it's definitely one of those puzzles that it's almost impossible to solve for everyone to be happy about. And one of my ideas would be just separate the stun from ultimates, for example. So it's like make a different stun effect that could be called, like, I don't know, a dazzle or anything. So then it can be balanced, like, so breach stun on his signature has a different effect and can be balanced differently than the ultimate stun that he has. Because that's one of the things, like, when you think about it, if you buff the stun on the ultimate, then it's gonna be too strong, or because now the normal stun is so strong as well. So there's like a connection and the power levels just getting, shifted out of control.
Yeah, I think we would likely do so. The big reason why we don't want to change the stun for both like abilities, like let's say on breach, is aspirationally we probably want concuss. If you as a player get concussed, we want it to feel the same way. So your muscle memory is like, oh, okay, like 5 years later, you're like, I got concussed. I know how to play against the concuss because it's not different between each of the ways I get concussed. Same with the flash. I'm flashed, I can still run away. Versus like a super flash where like you also like are stunned.
Yeah.
We don't want it. We want to make sure that like when we're saying like this part of the conversation is like when we say you get concussed, we want it to affect you in this way, whatever that is, like movement or gunplay or whatever. And then if we feel like there's another way to affect you that we want to separate out, well, that could be another buff. And we'll say that's like the premium way we slow you or whatever, So we definitely want to talk about that stuff and then like see if there's ways for us to make it so, because right now concuss does a lot of things and so it's good for a lot of agents. Is there a world where we do what you're saying is like separate the two, say, oh, we actually want the reason why you want does the concuss missile on Tejo, we want it for the movement, not the gunplay. So then do we change that from a concuss to a super slow or something, right? So that's the kind of conversations that I think like will be really helpful and like will help with the pain point that you're mentioning, which is if we nerf conk, are we nerfing like all of the agents? So that's we're gonna try to find clever solutions that allow us to kind of like scale the game in a way that makes it so that players can see a buff, get hit by a buff, understand what to do, and just like master what to do with that buff, or that debuff. So yeah. Same mind. Same. We're thinking a lot of the same things. Yeah.
Awesome. One of my last questions to you would be, that's still like, sorry, your old job. So agent design. Could you tell me, like, when designing agents, specifically the ones that you had input on, right? When it comes to designing them itself, do you think that the agent design, the utility, were being made with mechanics in mind first, or was it like lore and then work it out as utility? So like, oh, this agent, like teleportation and like some other stuff, or was it I have the idea for those mechanics and it would be cool to now build the lore around it? Which one was it?
I think it's less the lore. Some of it's lore. So like it depends. It depends on the agent. Like we're doing a better job right now of like, as we grow the team on the agent side, They have a lot of like talented designers that start with mechanics, and then they work with our artists and concept artists to be like, here's 2 abilities, like what could this look like? And then you're like, oh, that's a cool concept. Yeah, what if that inspires me to do this ability? Like we're starting to see a lot of that like coming forward. There's a lot of agents like Gekko that was more mechanics focused. And then like we kind of build the lore around it and improve the gameplay around that to make it more synergistic and harmonious. An example of another one was Kayo. Kayo didn't have a really good through line. He was just a toolkit agent.
I see.
throw, info, flash, ball, like grenade. And so there wasn't really much to him. And they're like, oh, like what if he was like this like radiant killer robot or something, and so we were like throwing around these ideas, and I was like,
so he had a wireframe,
like, silence, so yeah.
Okay.
So we were able to influence the gameplay in a way that like allowed him to have a more strong through line with his kit, which started at mechanics, injected some of the like the narrative, and then made it feel like it was like a holistic package. We try to do that with all of our agents. Like there's going to be a lot of agents that are just like are a general way. The lore comes online, you start to see the art, you're like, oh my god, that's so cool. What if it did this instead? And then you just kind of you're able to mold the gameplay to make it feel like it's a better package. And a lot of our characters have done that.
Okay, cool. All right, that's awesome. I think I exhausted the most important questions that I had to you. So Ryan, thank you so much for. I mean, you sacrificed what, like an hour and a half? Yeah, an hour and a half of your day from your work. I actually am taking you away from balancing the game right now. So sorry for that, but I'm very grateful that you were able to show up and answer those questions and able to share those informations with the community. Many of the questions I asked were actually influenced by the community of my own channel, because I asked them what would like you to know. And they could ask me questions and I will transfer them to you here. And many of them were actually definitely aligned with what I had in my mind as well when it comes to those questions. So again, thank you very much, Ryan, for coming in.
Of course, yeah.
Hopefully we can do this another time. It's maybe after some really big changes. Like I could maybe steal you for like 20 minutes after the harbor changes are made, and talk about that. That'd be fantastic, actually, when I think about it. But I don't want to steal you too much,
No, a lot of us love talking about this stuff too. So like we're always trying to find, now that we have time to do a lot of these and trying to find ways to talk. You see Dan a lot in the TikToks and Instagrams and Tiffy now talking to the team as well. So like, we're being more, we're trying our best to kind of like, talk to the community a lot more about these changes and make sure that we're doing the right things for the game. We're investing a lot into the live game. We're investing a lot into like the balance. And making sure that we have the resources for it. So it's just like, it's pretty exciting. It's going to be like a lot of talking with the community, a lot of these types of like interactions, and as we make changes, we'd love to continue to talk about this stuff. So
awesome, looking forward to it. If you have anything to add at the end of this interview, anything to say to the community,
I kind of mentioned it already earlier. Like we want to be a lot more active with talking to the community about different changes we have. We're making a bigger effort to like, add some transparency to some of the things we're working on, not keep everyone in the loop and hopefully make more changes, or as much as we can, that makes sense. So, I hope we get to see a lot more changes to the live game, or, not too much or not too little. We want to find the right balance of how much the game changes without it feeling too overwhelming. But we'll be listening a lot to the community and a lot of the feedback we get. So super helpful to hear all that from all the different mediums we get.
All right, then let's encourage people to ask you questions, guys, everywhere on the internet, and nag you on Twitter for sure.
That'd be awesome.
All right, okay. Thank you, Ryan, so much, and see you around.